Hello and welcome to Eye on Africa here on France 24. I'm Fraser Jackson. Here are the stories making headlines across the continent this evening. The Rwandan government says a key opposition figure will be released from prison this weekend. Paul Rusesabagina's sentence is said to have been commuted after intense negotiations with the United States, where he holds permanent residency. DR Congo's President Felix Tshisikedi reshuffles his cabinet ahead of December elections. His new appointments include a former militia leader who will now head up the country's defence. And as Ramadan starts across the Muslim world, Tunisians are struggling to make ends meet as soaring prices threaten their nighttime feasts. Thank you for being with us this evening. Our top story, Rwandan opposition figure Paul Rusesabagina is set to be freed from jail. The man who was portrayed as a hero in the film Hotel Rwanda is currently serving a 25-year sentence on terrorism charges, but was granted clemency following intense diplomatic efforts from the US, where he has permanent residency. Washington has always maintained that he was wrongfully detained. France 24's regional correspondent Clément de Roma has more for us from neighbouring Uganda.
Discussion for the release of Paul Rusesabagina intensified at the beginning of March, but remained very secret. The government finally announced this Friday a commutation of sentence by presidential order for the man depicted as a hero in the movie Hotel Rwanda, as well as 19 other people. The opponent of President Kagame was sentenced to 25 years in prison in 2021 for terrorism within the NFL, an armed group accused of carrying out attacks in Rwanda. Rusesabagina has always denied his involvement in these violent actions. His capture by the Rwandan government had been widely criticized in 2020, mainly because this Rwandan Belgian, who is also a US resident, had disappeared during a trip to Dubai and reappeared a few days later in detention in Kigali. The Rwandan government said at the time that the opponent had been extradited and was under an international arrest warrant, but did not give any details of his capture. His family and several NGOs then spoke of a kidnapping. In 2022, after his conviction, the United States said he was wrongfully detained. Negotiations had been intense since 2021 to obtain his release, and led by Washington, but also by Qatar, where President Kagame went on a working visit in mid-March.
Well, across the border in DR Congo, Felix Tshisekedi has been holding a cabinet reshuffle. Key takeaways include the appointment of Jean-Pierre Bemba, a former militia leader, as Minister of Defence. Bemba has in the past been jailed by the International Criminal Court for crimes committed by rebels under his control, but he was acquitted in 2018. His appointment comes as Kinshasa struggles to contain an ongoing armed rebellion in the east of the country, which the government and several Western nations say is being backed by neighbouring Rwanda. Kami Nedelek has more for us.
In a sweeping government reshuffle, an ex-warlord is DR Congo's newest defence minister. The former vice president, Jean-Pierre Bemba, is the founder of the Movement for the Liberation of Congo, an armed militia accused of committing thousands of murders, rapes and looting in the Central African Republic 2 decades ago. After almost 10 years behind bars awaiting trial, in 2016 the International Criminal Court sentenced him to 18 years in prison for war crimes and crimes against humanity. He was acquitted on appeal just a couple of years later, a decision Amnesty International decried as a huge blow to the victims of sexual violence. Bemba's new role means he'll be responsible for stabilising the east of the country, where clashes between M23 rebels and government forces displaced over 1 million people last year. Vital Kamerhe is similarly qualified for his new role as economy minister. He was sentenced in 2020 to 20 years in prison for embezzlement before being acquitted on appeal. The reshuffle comes as President Tshisekedi looks to strengthen his position ahead of running for re-election in December.
Senegal's government has arrested several opposition figures in the week of deadly protests just over a week ago. The violence was sparked by the opening of the defamation trial against opposition leader Ousmane Sonko. If Mr. Sonko is found guilty, he'll be disqualified from running in next year's presidential elections. Well, Sonko has been receiving medical treatment for what he says was an assassination attempt after he and his entourage were allegedly sprayed with tear gas as they were en route to the courthouse. His supporters are calling now for more protests. France 24's Sam Bradpiece has this update for us from Dakar in Senegal.
On Friday, the Senegalese opposition said it would organise fresh marches ahead of Ousmane Sonko's trial. But these days in Senegal, that is a risky business. The opposition claims that last week alone, hundreds of its supporters were detained. The police ignored our requests for confirmation of that, as is often the case. But what is certain is that in recent months, political activists, journalists, and even artists have been detained by the police for crimes or alleged crimes ranging from disturbing the public peace to spreading fake news. One thing they all have in common, though, is that they have criticised Macky Sall's government. Amnesty International is among the organisations which have raised concerns about what it sees as increased repression ahead of next year's presidential vote. Many observers agree that despite the fact it's currently Ramadan, a traditionally peaceful period of the year, there is a real risk next week ahead of Mr. Sonko's trial of violent clashes between protesters and the police.
Some Brabbies for us there in Senegal. After Cyclone Freddy wrought destruction in Malawi and Mozambique, the World Health Organization is warning of increased health risks, including malaria and malnutrition. In Mozambique, which was already battling a cholera outbreak before the cyclone, cases have more than doubled over the past week. Caroline Lamberley has the story.
Over a week after Cyclone Freddy hit Madagascar, Malawi and Mozambique, residents are still feeling its devastating effects. Aside from the material damage, people are now facing major health risks. Hundreds of health facilities were destroyed or flooded. The flooding, compounded with the interruption of critical services, also means that waterborne diseases can spread more easily.
The cyclone's devastation has raised public health risks, including the increased spread of cholera, malaria, vaccine-preventable diseases, even COVID-19, and malnutrition. And of course, support for trauma and mental health is equally needed.
Both Mozambique and Malawi were already grappling with cholera outbreaks. According to the WHO, cholera cases have more than doubled in Mozambique over the past week alone. In neighboring Malawi, which is battling its worst ever cholera outbreak, cases have continued to drop. But health experts worry that this trend could soon be reversed in Freddy's wake. For people on the ground, the threat of cholera is still all too real. Many were displaced and are now living in temporary accommodation centers.
We draw water from the nearby river. The river flows downstream from a graveyard. In the same area, there are pit latrines. With the rains, the latrines are filled with water, and all that stuff is being swept into the river we draw water from. So there is a risk of cholera. We also have children here facing similar risk because they too drink the same water.
The WHO estimates that more than 1.4 million people were affected by the extensive damage, flooding and torrential rains in Malawi, Mozambique and Madagascar.
Thursday saw the start of the holy month of Ramadan. But with the cost of living and inflation soaring, Muslims in Tunisia are struggling to make ends meet for their nightly feast. Experts have said the economy risks a collapse if the government fails to finalise a loan agreement with the International Monetary Fund. Fadil Alireza and our team on the ground report.
Every year for the month of Ramadan, markets like this one are set up so farmers can sell directly to consumers at lower prices.
I bought tuna, sausages, dates, some bananas. Banana prices are really lower, at 5 dinars a kilo instead of 8 dinars at a normal market. I only bought products where the prices were really attractive.
Even middle-class Tunisians are on a tight budget this year, like Ulfa, who works at a call center.
Everything has become too expensive. We can't make ends meet.
The Trade Ministry has deployed a whole program in recent months to fix the prices of certain goods and regulate their supply to avoid shortages. They also want to target speculators, one of President Kais Saied's major talking points.
On top of enforcing current regulations, we are also upgrading the legal codes in this area, especially to strengthen sanctions and give more power to oversight authorities.
The cost of goods is just one aspect of the economic crisis. Since December, negotiations have stalled with the International Monetary Fund regarding a $1.9 billion loan. Many economists are concerned.
On one side, there's the technical challenges, even if there's been some progress. But the political environment could also cause delays with the IMF deal. The Tunisian government must do much more to show it's committed to reform.
The situation has prompted international concern, with top diplomats from both the EU and the US warning this week that Tunisia's economy risks a collapse if it doesn't sign an IMF deal soon.
Well, that's it from me for now, but stay tuned to France 24. There's more news coming up next.